How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you this evening?
I'm pretty good.
I really appreciate you coming on. Your work, to be 1,000% honest, it has changed my mind about a lot of things. It kind of gives me like a gut, like a feeling in my gut that I'm not very comfortable with. Um, and like to be 1,000% honest with you, like I've gained financially because of cryptocurrencies, and that's what kind of gives me this like it really sucks because I know where they want to take it now, but at the same time, it's personally helped me financially. So I'm like, oh, but then now that I've learned even just since we've emailed back and forth
Yeah.
a lot more, and it's just giving me a really like, oh my God, kind of feeling in the bottom, the pit of my stomach. And it's like, well, what do I do? Do I sell it for dollars, which is another central banking tool that like it just feels like we're on a prison planet now. And it's like we need people like you to break out of it, to share the information that you've got, which I do want you to briefly, as briefly as possible. I know it's so intertwined, and I've watched, like I told you, your interview with Sire G. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name. Your 5-part episode on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, as well as the Mind Wars podcast and the Utopia is a Scam podcast. I briefed on a few others, but at a certain point, it was just like overwhelming, and I'd rather just kind of follow up on your blog. Um,
Right.
but basically, I do want you to kind of brief, what work it is that I'm referring to for people who have no idea what I'm talking about right now. Um,
Okay.
and then I've got a bunch of terms, basically social impact bonds, pay for performance or pay for behavior. Um, I guess payments really, or
Yeah.
script, I guess is the
Script.
script.
Behavioral script.
Right? Um, your background, from what I understand, is you're a teacher and you were concerned about standardized testing, and it kind of took you down a rabbit hole that has led you to this work, essentially. And yeah, so basically, I've kind of said enough. The other basically terms is Internet of Bodies, Internet of Things, geofencing, which is the one that really made the pit of my stomach do a 360. Digital twinning and 6G, which I had already heard about. Social credit scoring, which I think is maybe one of the more common terms here because people have heard about China's rollout. And I don't think they're, at least the collective consciousness, I don't think is uh, fully aware of how close we are to that here and
Right.
across the globe. Um, as well as the Internet of Nanobodies, Spatial Web, and Nanodust. I know those are just a few of the terms that um, are kind of novel to the collective consciousness, so to speak. So if
Right.
you could just go through.
Unless you're in on it. If you're in on it, you know all about it. You've known about it for like 20 years. That's what's so depressing.
Right. Well, I'm new to
Yeah.
it, so it's
Yeah.
really, like I said, it's changed my mind on a lot of things. But and the reason I wanted to have you on to talk to you is because I really want to dig deeper into how do we approach our decision making on a day-to-day basis, on a practical basis. And the one thing that you and I really shared, I was in it like deeply resonated with me, and we were in 1,000% agreement on, is just from a like a psychological foundation. I think that our culture really has some problems. Like you said in one of our dialogues back and forth, it's not like this thing came out of nowhere. Like central banking in and of itself is bad enough. They're just trying to take it to the next level. And it's funny that they're kind of pitching cryptocurrency as like this anti-central banking, like anti-fiat thing. But then when you start digging deeper into research like yours, you find out that that's a farce essentially.
Yeah. Well, do you want me just to say a little bit about myself so people know where I'm at and like what I've been working on in like the
Absolutely.
last 12 months? So, actually I'm a parent. I'm not a teacher, although I guess in some ways kind of like I'm an informal teacher at this point of this human capital impact bonds or and the Internet of Bodies. But I started just as a parent, which I think is unusual in like a lot of these circles. People were coming in around 9/11 or like other, Kennedy assassination, or like other things, and like have these long histories. So really my education is more than sort of a, an NPR listening liberal was through the public schools. And in 2013, Boston Consulting Group was brought in. My child went through all 13 years in the Philadelphia public school system, which is a large urban district, predominantly Black and brown kids, and we're a very poor city. So we were an incubator for almost every kind of privatization maneuver that was going on. And at that point, like that was what opened up, like, oh, these things are broken on purpose. They're broken to create profit centers. The profit centers are not actually meant to fix the problem. And around and around and around the cycle goes. So it started with these school closures. And then I was looking at how they weaponize data against schools and children to like further advance profit and control. So it's two parts. One is the making money, and two is controlling the society. And as we know with the, what's going on in Davos for the, so many years, is that their end goal is to sort of imagine a world, a post-human world, literally, like a world where carbon-based human beings are largely replaced by avatars and robots and AI algorithms. And as crazy as that sounds, like I never thought in like 2013, 14, 15, that when I was fighting testing, that it would end up like in nanorobotics and transhumanism. But if you keep pulling the threads and following the money and following the power, like that's where I've ended up the past year. So a lot of this, the control system is turning people into data, and then creating investment products essentially around like framing people as debt commodities, really, like as tradable debt commodities around their access to education. But not only that, healthcare, housing, other public, it's the full-on privatization of all of the social welfare state, public benefit state that there is. The further, I mean, it's already been quite torn asunder, but this is the last remnants. And so through these ideas of outcome-based government contracts, they will be essentially turned into private investment opportunities that can then be securitized. So people will almost be like these mortgages. The last global economic crash, they would take thousands of mortgages and bundle them together and slice and dice and trade them and gamble on them. It was just hedge funds and legalized gambling. And now they're going to do it again. But the debt that's being securitized will be debt on humanity and also debt on nature. So it's two phases. Cory Morningstar and Ron Kind of Green are very good on the corporate environmentalism takeover. So it's through this idea of technocracy, really, like a digital engineered planetary computing system that we can then take over, hijack everything and financialize it for these hedge funds to gamble on. And it's not like, I know later we'll talk a little bit about the blockchain stuff. I mean, it's happening even pre-blockchain, because a lot of these investments are coming not just out of hedge funds, but also people's retirement savings. Like if you've got a 401k, chances are your 401k is invested in this. If you go to a church and you tithe, chances are your church is invested in this too. So it is a full-on structure that we're trying to address, and with a very long historic context, which my framing is, out of not only enslavement, the history of enslavement in this country, but also indigenous genocide and dispossession, land theft. So, and that's the smart city agenda, is sort of like we are all being placed in the position of the Lakota in the second part of the 19th century, right? Like, welcome to the club, like now we know what it really feels like to be an empire, like to be a target of inland empire. And that is our cells, and that's biotech. So that's really like, I came into this through education and then through poverty management, like the industrial corporate nonprofit complex that was being managed by predatory philanthropy, really, and turned into these data centers. And then it became, within the last 12 months, really about the biosecurity state. So leveraging our bodies against us. Now the war on terror is actually the war on carbon-based life. Oh my gosh, carbon, anything, you're a national security threat if you're walking around as a healthy person. And that is a whole on propaganda component, which is hard to imagine, like for me, where things have gone in terms of potentially weaponizing frequencies or other elements that we may not be fully aware of that would really hijack the consciousness of people mostly all around the world, for most people, to really like set logic and common sense and understanding of geopolitics and markets and everything that I thought that the left would understand aside, empire, all of it. It's like they forgot all of it. And now we're just begging the state for our, for our safety. And it just knowing that the state is Google and Goldman Sachs, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,